Hi everyone, my name is Costa Dara Krishna. Today my group will present the industrial relation system in the Cambodia. But before that, I will introduce my group member first. Muhammad Amiruddin, Nur Hummayrah, Nur Izzah Izzati, and Sharon Martin. Cambodia is country that is located in the Southeast Asia. Cambodian people are usually known as the Cambodian or Khmer. Cambodia is one of the famous Asian member states with the Angkor and Korwat. And the majority of the Cambodian is the Theravada, Buddhist, and some of its people are also Muslim of the Muslim tradition. Cambodia is the 73rd most populous country in the world with a population of 17,164,411. Cambodia is set up as the multi-party democracy under the constitutional monarchy. The king serves as the head of the state and the prime minister is the head of the royal government. Narodom Sihamoni, the king was crowned in the Hun Sen, has been the prime minister since the 1985. According to Asian Development Bank, Cambodia economy contracted by 3.1 in 2020 because of the coronavirus pandemic, and GDP per capita in Cambodia decreased sharply from 8.7% in 2019 to negative 7.5% in 2020. There are several main drivers of growth in Cambodia, namely tourism, construction, garment, and paddy. These sectors are highly sensitive to the external economic situation and weather conditions.
Here I will present for chapter 2. The first is industrial relations system in Cambodia. Its goal is to improve the workplace while also incorporating a stronger employment relationship structure. It is also critical for unions and employers to reach an agreement in order to avoid strikes and to be more proactive in addressing employee challenges and needs. One of the most difficult challenges that employers face is negotiating with many unions. Secondly is the employment laws. For the employment relationship, there are two types of employment contracts under labor law. First is fixed duration contract with a maximum term of 2 years that must be in writing and clearly state the start and end dates. Second is unfixed duration contracts. It's not required to be in writing. However, to ensure that everyone is on the same page, it is recommended that the parties document their rights and obligations in writing. Next is probationary periods. The employment contract can be terminated without notice during probationary period, which cannot exceed 3 months for regular employees, 2 months for specialists, and 1 month for non-specialist employees. The third is trade unions in Cambodia. There are a few lists of laws contained in trade unions. First is employees and employers have the right to form unions and associations. Second, a union must have a minimum of 10 workers in a given enterprise. Third, unions and employer associations must register with the Labor Ministry, and those do not register are illegal. Fourth, for a strike to be legal, it's required that a secret ballot is to be cast by at least 50% plus 1 of the total members participating in the decision-making meeting on the strike. Fifth, unions or associations can be dissolved by the labor court. And the last, shop stewards can only be dismissed after authorization from labor inspector. Next is collective bargaining in Cambodia. Collective agreement must be written in Khmer and not specify their scope of application. There is no specific legal disposition that requires employers to enter into collective bargaining agreement. Collective agreement will be signed between the employer and the shop steward if there is no union in the enterprise, but the terms of such agreement cannot exceed 1 year. For defined terms, the collective bargaining agreement lasts not exceed 3 years, and for the undefined the collective agreement can be cancelled. Lastly is right to strike. The right to go on strike is guaranteed by the Cambodian constitution and the labor law. During the strike, the allowance for work is not provided and the salary is not paid. Freedom of work for non-strikers shall be protected against all form coercion or threat. Employers are not allowed to impose any sanction on employees as a result of their strike participation. If the employer imposes any sanction, the employer is subject to a fine of 61 to 90 days, base daily wage, or imprisonment for 6 days to 1 month. And the last, strike is considered illegal if it's not peaceful and doesn't comply with the provision of labor law.
Next is the total labor force. According to the World Bank collection, the Cambodia labor force total 9,358,533 in 2021. The labor force consists of the person aged 15 and above who provide work for the production product and service throughout the specific time period and goal. For the present of the foreign worker, there is 120,000 foreigners apply for the work permit. However, local authority estimated the number is much higher, noting that many foreigners neglected or intentionally did not apply for the permit. Foreign workers in the Cambodia make up 2% of the country population of 16 million people. There are an estimated 210,000 Chinese workers in the Cambodia, and many of them are employed in construction, real estate, and the garment sector.
Here we go for the next point, which is employment of domestic workers and foreign workers. There are two contracts for Cambodian labor. First is fixed duration contracts, FDC. Under Article 67 of the labor law, an FDC has to be written, contains a specific starting and ending date, and can be for a period of 2 years or less. Second is underdetermined duration contracts, UDC. Can be verbals or written. All verbals labor contracts are labor contracts of undetermined duration. Next point is the sector and determinant of the employment patterns. Agriculture continues to be the most significant sector of the Cambodian economy in terms of GDP share, and it employs the great majority of the workforce. Second sector is industry. In March 2015, the government created and implemented an Industrial Development Policy (IDP). The World Bank stated in July 2017 that it will lend Cambodia $540 million from 2018 to 2021 to finance economic growth. Third sector is services. The most important service activity in Cambodia is tourism, which is a key source of foreign investment and the fastest growing sector of the economy. Next is government agencies handling domestic workers and foreign workers. The Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training has been given a mission by Royal Government of Cambodia to lead and take over labour and vocational training throughout the government of Cambodia. The Ministry of Manpower and Vocational Training has two sectors and shall perform its own functions and responsibilities. Labour sector, responsible for the strengthening the labour law, conduct inspections in companies and establishments, coordinate communication between employees and employers, resolving both collective labour dispute and individual labour dispute. Vocational training sector, responsible for reviewing and preparing the national employment policy, design the principles, and manage the system. There were 6 general departments of labor in Cambodia. First, Department of Labor Inspection, monitor the implementation of laws and manage labor inspection. Second, Department of Labor Dispute, draft laws and regulations and implement them. Third, Department of Employment and Manpower, manage the issue of employment and foreigners who do business in Cambodia. Fourth, Department of Social Security, compose law on social security. Fifth, Department of Child Labour, design and develop policies, laws, and other provisions relevant to child labour. Last but not least, Department of Occupational Health, design technique, materials for the field of labour hygiene. The first point is payment of wages. Cambodia monthly minimum salaries for regular worker is $194 and for probationary workers is 192 US dollar. Salaries are paid twice a month. The second point is employment of women. According to World Bank, there was 48.41% of women employed in Cambodia in 2021. Most of the women in Cambodia work in garment industry.
Then, I'll continue to talk about working hours and leave. Generally, Cambodians work 8 hours per day and 48 hours a week. Employees should not be expected to work more than 9 hours per day and more than 2 hours of overtime per day. Overtime is compensated at 1.5 times the regular wage, but if performed at night or holiday, it is 2 times from the regular wage. Besides that, they also have 1 day off every week and can get up to 6 months of sick leave with a doctor's certificate. Cambodia also celebrates 19 public holidays every year. Next is termination and benefits of employees. In Cambodia, employment contracts can be fixed or undetermined terms. The shortest length of contracts is 6 months, while the longest is more than 1 year and needs to prepare 15 days notice period. Then, for the undetermined terms, the longest one, which is more than 10 years, and they need 3 months notice period before termination. Then, employees with a fixed duration contracts are entitled to severance payment, which must be at least 5% of the total wages paid to the employees during the length of the contracts, while employees with an undetermined duration contracts are entitled to lay-off compensations depend on how long the employees has worked for the employer. Then we proceed to employment of foreigner. Every foreigner who working at Cambodia must have labor card and labor book, while for the permanent resident foreigner, they must meet all the national security conditions. For quota setting, Cambodian-based company can only have 10% of its total workforce by foreign employees, and who exceeds will be fined. In order to get work permit, they must obtain a valid E-class visa and employment card. However, to apply it, they need to prepare a few documents as you can see on the slide right now. Then, we also have minimum retirement age for the civil servants. The government have extended to 60 years old and to receive the pension like Malaysia. Like Malaysia, we got KWSP and SOCSO. So in Cambodia, they must register number of NSSF for a minimum of 20 years. However, no provision in the law that state the retirement age of employee for the private sector. Next, there are a few policies related to children. However, policies can exist that hinder efforts to address child labor, including integrating child labor elimination and protection strategies into relevant policy. So, all these policies exist for a purpose to prevent violence against children, including the worst form of child labor. Now, I will show you all the statistics on children work and education in Cambodia. Most of them are attending school, but there are 8% of children are working while 6% doing work and school. Most of them are work in agriculture sector such as fishing, production of tobacco and so on. They are working because they are required to pay family debts and pay school related fees even they had free basic education. Next, there are other relevant matters related to the employment scenario in Cambodia. First, we have the National Social Security Fund, which is responsible for providing basic social security to employees in the private sector. They provide many provisions and allowance for employee benefits. Next is the Occupational Risk Scheme. It only covers occupational hazards to provide medical treatment and allowance in the event of any accident. Then we have the health care scheme, which refers to social health insurance, and lastly is maternity and paternity leave. Female employees who have worked for an employer for at least 1 year are generally entitled to 90 days off at half of their normal salary, while fathers are entitled to 1 day of paid paternity leave only.
Okay, finally, I will finish up our presentation with the summary. In this part, I will explain the differences and similarities between Cambodia and Malaysia. First of all, working hours in Malaysia and Cambodia are more or less the same, where employees are allowed to have at least 1 day of rest per week, and then their maximum working hours are 8 hours per day and 48 hours a week. Then, the first difference between Cambodia and Malaysia is in terms of the government agency that handle domestic and foreign worker in both countries. In Cambodia, the Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training (MOLVT) and social partners in migration management and protection of foreign worker. And the Ministry of Labour and Vocational Training has been given a mission by the Royal Government of Cambodia. This government handling to lead and take over labour and vocational training throughout the Kingdom of Cambodia. Then the Ministry of Manpower and Vocational Training is divided into two sectors, which is labour sector and then vocational training sector. Each sector with its own set of function and responsibility. From Malaysia, it is the Ministry of Home Affairs, the One Stop Center (OSC), and the Immigration Department. So the Foreign Worker Management Division is the Secretariat of the OSC for foreign workers to establish to process application for foreign worker for approved sectors and following the failure of employers to procure local workers. The establishment of the OSC for foreign workers was in line with the government's aspiration to practice good governance and reduce bureaucracy, thereby improving the quality of service delivery to the people, such of issuing passport, travel document, visas, passes, and permits, and then managing and administering the movement of people at permitted entrance and exits, and enforcing immigration legislation such as the Immigration Act 1959/63 and the Passport Act 1966. The second difference between the two countries is that the minimum wage for Cambodia was starting on 1st January 2022. The minimum monthly wage in Cambodia will be $194 or 786 cash out for regular workers, then $192 for 778,000 cash out for probationary workers. So then the Prime Minister of Malaysia on 19 March 2022 announced that the quantum of the national minimum wage for be increased from 1,200 ringgit to 1,500 ringgit. So the minimum wage order 2022 MWO 2022 was subsequently gazetted on 27 April 2022, implementing the new minimum wage effective from 1 May 2022. Thirdly, it is the differences in annual leave between Cambodia and Malaysia. For Cambodia, they're working 48 hours a week, are entitled to 1/2 day of annual leave for every month of service. Then for annual leave in Malaysia, employees are also entitled to pay annual leave, which range from 8 days to 16 days depending on the employer. Okay, next, the differences in compensation if the justification of the dismissal is not valid. In Cambodia, is between 6 and 12 months and 15 days of wage and fringe benefit for each year of service. If the worker has more than 12 months of service and of dismissal will be equal to. So then for the Malaysia, the basis is 1 month salary for every year of service. Last but not least, the difference between these two countries' minimum retirement age is that in Cambodia, it is 55 years of age with at least 60 months of the contribution during the 10 years prior to the entitlement. So then the minimum retirement age in Malaysia is 60 years old regardless of gender. That's all from our groups, and thank you for your attention.